So I grew up seeing a lot of violence as a kid and drug use and abuse. You're gonna hear gunshots at night. Like, that's what we saw growing up. Started running with street gang very early. By the time I was 12, I was already like dealing. I already, set up my own little personal business, whatever. When I got older and by my teenage years, I was getting into a lot of trouble. This is the way that we grew up. Because I grew up in that type of environment, my mother was very strong in telling me, you're gonna only have one girl. My mother used to say that to me all the time.
I remember prior to meeting my husband, I used to pray a lot. Like, I used to pray and just say, God, please give me someone who's going to be respectful. And the strangest thing is, I said, and who loves music. I have no idea why, like as an adult. And as I got older, I'm going, why did I say who loves music? I had no idea.
My mother passed away. My mother overdosed. She was addicted to narcotics. Pain that I felt at that time was unlike any pain I ever felt before in my life. That void left something very, very deep inside of me. My wife was the biggest thing that got me through. And then after that, we just decided, okay, we need to be serious. So I remember telling everybody at this point, I said, listen, I'm going to propose. This may be. I called her onto the stage, and I get down on one knee in front of everybody else, and I proposed to her.
Welcome back to another very special edition, Hanukkah edition of Stories of Hope. This week, we had the honor of featuring Nissim Black, and for the very first time in the history of a podcast, his wife, Adina. Adina, thank you for taking the brave steps forward to share your unbelievable story. This week's story is going to be one of adventure, insight, adversity, and unbelievable inspiration as you hear Nissim and Adina's story of growing up completely unaffiliated up to where they are today, learning how they got there, learning what they have to share about their journey, about their marriage, and about their passion of Yiddishkeit and Judaism. I'm so excited for you to watch this episode, and I know you're going to love it. If you've been following our podcast, then you know we're big fans of PZ Deals. And you also know that they've been running this crazy giveaway for a free car lease. Maybe you thought of entering it, but I want to tell you something really important. The free entry for the free car lease ends this Thursday. So if you want a chance to be the lucky winner, then all you need to do are these two things. Number one, download the free PZ Deals app. It takes 60 seconds. Once it's downloaded, open the app and click the banner that says, click here to enter to win a free car lease. In another 60 seconds, you'll be done. It's that simple. So download the free PZ Deals app, have a chance to maybe win a free car lease, and with PZ Deals, never pay full price again. Hi, I'm Tzipora Grodko, and this is the Stories of Hope podcast. I'm really excited to be here with the legend himself, Nissim Black, and the woman behind the legend, Adina. It is Adina's first time ever being interviewed, and boy, oh boy, am I incredibly humbled that you chose to come on Stories of Hope.
You.
Wow.
Thank you.
Like if we had a button that said applause, I'd click it right now. Thank you. We're so honored to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both
Thank
of
you
you.
so
Yes,
much.
thank
Thank
you.
you for having us.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, Adina,
Yes.
I am so curious to hear what your background was like, where you grew up. Help us get a little bit of a peek into what your life was like.
Okay, so Baruch Hashem, I grew up in Louisiana. Actually, I was born there, and it wasn't until I was maybe 7 or 8 that my mother decided to move to Seattle, Washington. And the reason behind that was because my grandparents passed away. I think a week between the two passing. My grandmother passed away, and then like a week later, literally, my grandfather passed away.
Ooh.
And so my mother knew like she needed something, it was too much for her. So she needed a change. And Baruch Hashem, she decided to move to Seattle, Washington. And that's pretty much where I grew up. Middle school, high school, and some college. And here we are.
I know there's a lot of pieces until we got here, but thanks for the little snippet. Thank you for the little background.
Yes, in a nutshell.
In a tiny piece of a nutshell. Thank you. How about you, Nissim?
So I'm actually a Seattle native. So I was born in Seattle, and my parents stayed in Seattle. So I didn't have any journeying or moving or anything like that. So all throughout high school and different things like that, I was a very, very I was a social butterfly as a kid. So I always knew in my mind that the people that I knew in my immediate circle at that time were all, I wouldn't say necessarily temporary, but like I knew I wanted to meet more people. I always felt like I didn't meet enough people in my life. So I knew at some point I would travel and get around, but I would have never thought in a million years I would have ever left Seattle. So that's just really where I came from. My upbringing has been probably on a lot of podcasts, but saw a lot of violence and different things like that growing up as a kid. And faith came into play with my grandfather. So I started with faith at I think maybe already 8 or 9 years old or whatever. My grandfather came to live with us. He was a Sunni Muslim, so I prayed with him 5 times a day, which was ironic. At the same time, my father, who was going through his life transformation, became like a Christian, and not only just a Christian, but he became like a theologian. So we crossed paths at 13 because I was going to an after-school program, a hip hop program that was ran by a Christian organization. And so over there, which really probably saved my life at that point, where I was headed, as a young kid. So I always have a card for that organization. They took me in. They were like big brothers and like family for me at the time. And so after that, I converted to Christianity. So that was my introduction to Christianity. Now, all the while, I should say this, I was growing up in a Jewish neighborhood the whole entire time. So I seen Yidden all the time. I was very, very, familiar
How
with seeing
lucky.
everybody. And I always say, I'm very happy about this. I didn't have any ounce of or any speck of anti-Semitism at all. I had only one problem, is that on Saturdays, I like to ride my bike. We would make up ramps and all that. And I never understood why all the Jews walking in the middle of the street. You could walk on the sidewalk. Why you walk in the middle of the street? That was the only issue I had. Other than that, we had no problems. Like I grew up, with my Jewish neighbors. They would call the police on us often, but we were all good. But other than that, it was an amazing experience growing up as a kid. I seen a lot of things, and as much as my story's been out there, like I still grew up. I was a kid, and I grew up, and I became an adult that still feels like he's a kid. So, and then like my wife said, we're now here in Yerushalayim. I got interested in Yiddishkeit when I was around 20 years old. So 20 years old was the year that that everything started pointing towards Hashem and started pointing towards Torah.
Wow. And for those who may have not heard any of your previous podcasts, it's very hard to consolidate an entire life in some spark notes of a version. But I really want people to appreciate the depth and the journey that both of you have been through. Can you share a little bit of a background? I know you said you grew up as a child, you already had to become an adult. Can you share a little bit more about that for those that may not know?
So I grew up seeing a lot of violence as a kid and drug use and abuse. I was exposed to that. That's not necessarily how my wife grew up, but and we did cross paths very early. But I grew up really, like people will see movies today and like, Boys in the Hood and South Central, all that stuff like that. Not that any of your viewers should watch all this stuff. I'm just saying this is the way that we grew up. Like, and when you live in that type of world, you don't necessarily think of anything outside of that world. You don't start thinking that there's some other type of way to live. So you grow up, basically, copy paste, everything that you see in your life. You become a product of your environment. So when I got older and by my teenage years, I was getting into a lot of trouble running with the wrong crowd. Now the truth is that I was always very spiritually intuitive. I was always just faking a little bit. You understand? Just trying to keep up with the rest of everybody else, even though I was different, and people knew I was different. I had a cousin who talked to me, few years back and told me, it's like, it doesn't surprise me. Even I don't understand anything about Judaism, but you were really always different. Your heart was different. You were different. Which was so obviously all that, what I was doing wasn't fooling anybody, because my cousin still was able to say that she knew that I was very different then. So started running with street gang very early, 12 years old or whatever. I think we first started making gangs when we were like 10 or something like that. We used to dress up in all black fags. We would grow up and see all the older guys on the street would be covered with all these, gangsters. So we used to see them all the time, staying out till late at night and whatever the case is. And by the time you go home, whatever, you're going to hear gunshots at night. Like, that's what we saw growing up. So that was the coolest thing. Some kids wanted to be Power Rangers. We wanted to be gangsters because that's what we saw growing up. So by the time I was 12, I started running with the street gang, Gangster Disciple Nation, which is really big in Seattle. So there's different areas. I'm not going to give you a whole geography lesson. But ultimately, that's where I started to see that there was really something deeper. I really just felt a need and somewhat of a, I want to say calling, for lack of a better term, to be a part of something that was bigger than myself. I didn't necessarily need gangs, but I knew that I was supposed to be a part of something bigger and greater than myself. So by 12 years old, almost 13 or whatever, somewhere around that time, I got expelled from the Seattle School District. Got in trouble. I mean, that year I was in the principal's office more than the principal. So it was like, it was inevitable. It was coming. We were already, smoking pot. I know people do this like recreational. We did it when it was illegal.
And 12.
Yeah, that started at 9, actually. And so by the time I was 12, I was already like dealing. I already, set up my own little personal business, whatever. I remember taking all my Christmas money, and then that's for a different show. That's what I did. I would take all the Christmas money. And what was crazy is, like, I was going to like my dad's friends. Like, that's who the people I was going to. So all the people that I was buying from were the people that were in my house, my uncles and, good friends or whatever, so to speak. And I would re-up, go meet them around the corner and come back and whatever. So that was like, you talk about dysfunction on the next level, And so by the time I'm suspended and everything from school, I ended up talking to one of my friends who wasn't like a saint by no stretch of imagination, but he was really into hip hop. So he said, there's this hip hop program at this place called the Union Gospel Mission. You should come. So by that time already, I hooked up with a producer, Vitamin D. My uncle RC was recording for a major studio. And I had already recorded, 2-3 professional records already by that time with big producers. So I felt like it was a little below me to go to some hip hop program. So he ended up going, and actually he ended up convincing me to go, but it was actually one of the best things that happened to me, because being in that environment kept me so busy and kept me around such good people that it really made me calm down a lot in my life. And what's interesting is, contrary to, popular belief, is that you would think to work with inner city kids, you would take people who are very familiar with that type of background, and whatever rehabilitation they go through, whether it was in prison or out, whatever the case is, they would be the best people to go back into those communities. I don't find that that's always the truth. What they did, for whatever reason, there was a lot of suburban, white kids that came who had a real heart for, God in their way, and wanted to help out the kids in the inner city. That was the best thing that could have happened, because that was the only way that I was able to see something outside the life that I had already been accustomed to. And so that made me start thinking. It was the first thing to start opening me up. So long story short, I went to camp, had an amazing experience, became a Christian after that, which was perfect timing because I was just starting high school. I got a letter allowing me to go back to a regular public school. I don't know if the high school I went to was that much better than the alternative schools I was in, but whatever the case was, I ended up going to a high school. And thought everything was coast clear and I was doing good. And it would be my 10th grade year, which I think this is very special to announce to your audience, that I was in between. It was August 20th. We'll never forget the day. It was August 20th, and one of my best friends at the time was dating a new girl. It was his birthday, and it happened to be my wife's birthday also, too, August 20th. So he came over to my house to introduce everybody to his new girlfriend or whatever, and really to collect money. So we have a minhag where we come from, that when it's your birthday, you're going to collect money from all the drug dealers or whatever the case like that. So I don't recommend anybody going to do that, but I just tell you that's what it was. So he knew where everybody was at my house. So he would come, collect some money, introduce everybody to his new girlfriend. But his new girlfriend had a sister, and she also showed up at my house. So I was 16 years old, and I don't know if it was love at first sight, because I was dirty and just came from football practice when I met my wife. But we started talking, and that's actually when I met my wife.
So I'll pause you there. August 20th
is
August
not
20th.
my birthday.
It's not. It's your mother's birthday.
I thought
It's
you
your
said
mother's birthday.
I was gonna say Black. Come on, we can't do that.
I'm right. I said your mother's birthday and
Yes.
Robert's
So
birthday.
it actually sounds like, the perfect opening for a movie. You just came back from football. It's your best friend's birthday. Comes in with his girlfriend, introduces you to her sister. It almost sounds too cliche for Hallmark. Adina, tell us what happened. You're in 10th grade?
Yes, actually 11th. I'm older than my
She's
husband.
older than me.
Oh.
I like older women.
Even better.
I'm joking.
You're in 11th grade. Nissim's in 10th grade. You get introduced to him. What's going on in your mind?
Well, truthfully, I was like overwhelmed because his house was known as that house. Like really. And so we were actually leaving, my sister and his best friend at the time. And before we left, Nissim, I think you drove up from football practice, and he was very friendly. I didn't really think much of it except for, oh, okay, he seems like a nice guy. Football, fine. But what blew me away about my husband was the fact that he could have a decent conversation, despite the fact of his environment. He was very respectful. He didn't say things to me like, hey, Ma, this type of thing. It was very hi, how are you? Very respectful. And so
even as a 10th grader who was previously in a gang.
Yeah.
Very, very respectful. And that just made me go, wow, he's a nice guy. He's a respectful guy. I don't really get that very often. Guys are not really so respectful or so, respectful.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me, I guess.
What happened next?
What happened next? So, you want me to tell it?
What happened next?
Well, usually when I'm telling the story about myself, I usually go ... and she couldn't stop thinking about me after that. She may say differently, but I think, I'm used to talking all the time, so I could talk. But I think what happened after that is we talked for a very long time. Robert,
did you have, sorry to interrupt you, did you have cell phones? You spoke on the house phone? You spoke in
person?
No,
we were in person.
We were in person. We were talking face to face. That was the first time we ever thought we came across each other, actually. There's another piece to that. Yeah. But that was the first time we actually thought we came across each other. And but one thing I would say about my wife was that I felt it even from the first time that I met her. She felt familiar. Felt very, very familiar. I felt like I had seen her before, that I knew her somewhere. There was no doubt about it that it didn't feel like, oh, this is just really the first time I met this girl. It didn't feel like that to me. I actually really did feel like I knew my wife before. And there's reasons why I think on a teva level that could have happened, which I'll explain in a little bit. But so after that, Robert, later on, after he left, and
Robert's your best friend.
Robert was my best friend at the time, and he was dating her older sister, Kendra. And so after they left, I think then maybe a couple came by, and he used to stay by my house all the time. We were that close. He would stay there whether I was at home or not at home. My family treated him like he was just like a. So one day we was in, I was like, the girl we met the other day, and I asked him about her. I said, what's the story? She whatever, she's dating, whatever, she's a good girl, whatever. He's like, yeah. He said, you should come to church. And I was like, man, And I was a Christian, very devout. I mean, I think that was most of what we talked about when we talked.
Right.
When we were talking, she was very involved in the youth ministry at a certain church she was involved in, and I was involved in ministry at the other place. So we were young, leaders that were being groomed to do like outreach. I think
The irony that you connected initially spiritually
Right.
as Christians, and
Right.
now we're sitting here
exactly.
and you're Orthodox Jews
Right.
living in Beit Shemesh.
Right,
Baruch
right.
Hashem.
So we knew all together. Hashem brought us together.
Yeah.
So what happened is, so he tells me to go to church. Now the thing is that I had already made up with Hashem that we're good every day of the week, but Sundays is for football. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I gotta give up my Seahawks, you know what I'm saying, on a Sunday, for church, and I just say, she would have been nice. It would have been really nice. So anyway, we started talking. He tells me that they go to church on Saturday. She was Seventh-day Adventist at the time.
Right.
So I went. I think that was the next time that we saw each other was at Emerald City because he didn't want to give me her number. He wanted me to go ask her for her number at the place. So all the meanwhile, I should say, she was also feeling the same way because he was giving me reports, that she enjoyed the conversation.
So what happened was,
okay, let's hear it.
you had a nice song that I liked, and it wasn't about just regular things. It was about God.
Huh.
And so I remember like his best friend Robert would play it, and I would listen to it and I'd go, oh, this is so nice. This is so nice.
Yeah.
And again, so it's really about, Nissim is very deep. He can get very deep. That also is like what attracted me to him, is because a lot of guys are they were so about not really anything that's important.
Substance.
Very, I guess people could be very degrading coming from that place. And they already have a negative outlook on women, or how they should approach women, or what women are supposed to be. And Nissim was not like that. And so, and it showed from the conversation, his music. And so he was right. I did think about him. And Baruch Hashem.
So
Yeah.
after, you're both clearly very deep people. And I feel like deep people in a shallow place is very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable.
Right.
After you got connected at the church, how did your relationship evolve, and how did it last so long? Because I would imagine the average person that meets in 10th grade in public school
Right.
isn't making it through that thunderstorm of evolution.
It's true.
So I could say it wasn't easy. Baruch Hashem, like, it was a roller coaster. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of, I guess, the way that he grew up. For instance, I remember, I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but like, I would knock on his door, and like his father would just let me stand there, like, because the way that he grew up is you don't have to knock on a door. You just walk in, whether if it's your house or not. And I grew up the total opposite way, like very respectful. You respect your elders. You don't walk into someone else's home. Whatever. You say please, you say thank you, these types of things. My husband did not necessarily grow up that way. But I think there's a catch to that. His father, his dad, stepfather, has a big heart, and he loves everyone. And so it was almost like an insult for me to knock on the door. I should have just walked in like everyone else. And so that was a bit of a conflict for me. It's just like, I'm standing outside your door and no one's letting me in, like I'm a bit offended, like, you want to welcome me in a little bit, like that type of thing. Also, Nice was very popular growing up. Like, we went to different high schools. I was not. I was very, me, my friend, a couple of other friends, and that was it. But I remember telling some of my friends, that I was interested in this guy, and one of my friends knew him, and she said, "Well, you don't want to do that. Like, he's like, not for sure, not the one." And I didn't really listen to her, but I listened to her, and I didn't take it to heart. I wanted to see for myself, and Baruch Hashem, I did, and here we are.
Interesting. My wife always, she jokes with me. She always says, if we were Jewish and they were shidduchim, they would never pair me with you.
They wouldn't. Really, they wouldn't have,
never
because
pair
I
me
was
with
like
you.
the quiet by myself, and Nis was very popular, not just in his high school, my high school, just everyone knew him, and I didn't really know that until after we started dating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I discovered that he's like this popular guy.
Mm-hmm. And once you made that discovery and you saw how different the two of you were, was there any part of your relationship where you thought like, I don't think I'm the right person for him? I feel like we're so different. Or those
No.
things that you thought mattered didn't matter anymore?
So those things didn't matter anymore. I didn't doubt it at all. I knew that my husband was my husband, despite the fact of the way that he grew up. And Baruch Hashem, no doubts.
And when did the two of you get married?
Yeah, we which marriage?
The first one?
No, the first one. So I should say we very, very important pieces that I wanted to actually
hope
bring
you
into
remember that.
my wife. Of course I remember. You want to do a game? You want to test and see
No,
who
please
remembers? No, I'm
don't.
joking. No. So what happened? Shortly after we went through our high school years together, right? So I'm gonna lead up to the marriage. I'm gonna paint you some of a picture. So, my wife, very important piece that she made me chase her for like 10 months. She would not officially start dating me for like 10 months.
Adina, that's what I'm talking about.
So, and I had to be persistent, so I was calling and talking to her all the time, and we were, stay up until late at night on the phone. and so it was right after high school, things started to kind of take off for me. Right before high school, I was offered a record contract with a big company and stuff like that. And one of my things was I always knew that somehow, some way I was going to be successful in music. I knew that was going to be my thing. How, what, whatever. I did have ideas on how that was going to happen. So one of the things I always wanted and I prayed for, I said, God, let me find my wife before I become more successful, more famous, that people are going to know. Because after that, who trusts anybody after that?
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
That takes tremendous maturity
Mm-hmm.
and insight.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine most of your friends, unless I'm wrong, were not marriage minded, but relationship. I don't know if relationship minded is even the right word. Companionship minded. So how did you have that? Where did that come from?
It's a good question. My mother, to be honest, as much as she was like, it's the craziest thing. Sometimes I tell my story, and then the way that people understand it afterwards is like, there's so many different nuances. My mother was a very, very faithful person. There was a story once of, I grew up around a lot of what we used to call players, right? These guys, each guy that's coming around, they were coming around with different women every time they would come back to the house, unfortunately. So because I grew up in that type of environment, my mother was very strong in telling me, you're going to only have one girl. My mother used to say that to me all the time. So one time I remember I was a young kid, and one of my uncles had come over the house, and I noticed, everybody told me this story because I was very, very young. I was like 5 years old, I think, when this happened. And he came over this time, and I think he had a really, he had a relationship with one girl, and then he had also another relationship with another girl and whatever. So he brought her also over the house, and I was a young kid. So I remember going over to him, and I said, Uncle Evan, he said, my mom said you can only have one girlfriend, so you have to give one to me. So I remember that, and I said in front of him, I got him in so much trouble. So, all throughout high school, I saw guys just being guys and girls being girls. And I grew up in that environment. And because I had that critical point of becoming such a devout Christian by the time I was already starting high school, my whole head had already flipped. It had switched. So I was marriage minded from the 9th grade already. I was like, whoever I'm gonna date, I'm gonna marry. That was already, I was thinking about that already, all throughout high school. So I didn't date anybody until I met my wife, and
Same.
so I was
The same.
already thinking about that all the time. I think guys also too with her, like, oh, you're marriage material. I would get that all the time. Oh, you're marriage material. We're not there yet. Not that I was even approaching them, but they that were just the things that girls would say to me all the time. You're like, oh, he's marriage material, like
Wow.
and you know. Dot dot dot. We're not even thinking anything like that. He's an old man, basically, is what they're saying. And it wasn't even girls I would be talking to, but just that was the way it was. So by the time we realized, I think we started our journey, and what really happened was I proposed to my wife.
Shame. Can I interject here a little bit?
Just I'll get to it later.
Just based on what he was saying, he's right. I remember prior to meeting my husband, I used to pray a lot. Like I used to pray and just say, God, please give me someone who's going to be respectful. And the strangest thing is, I said, and who loves music. I have no idea why, like as an adult. And as I got older, I'm going, why did I say who loves music? I had no idea. But the reason why I said someone who was respectful and someone who's a good guy is because I grew up seeing guys who were just not good guys towards girls. Like it was horrible. And so the reason why it took me so long to allow my husband in, sort of say, is because I wasn't going to jump that gun, sort of say. I was going to, lad, I need to know who you are, right? Where you're from? What are you about? What do you want? I didn't want to play games. I didn't want to be one of those girls who just,
That also reflects so much about you, because I think a woman's nature is to want to be wanted.
Yes.
I feel like it shows that you had so much self-confidence and self-respect.
Yes.
Sure
It's a
did.
requirement. It's a requirement, because otherwise, if a woman or girl, if they don't have that self-esteem, they'll fall for anything.
Mhm.
If they don't have that self-confidence, it's a danger zone there for me. And this is why, when I talk to young women who are not married yet, I advise them. I say, please don't lower your standards. A lot of people would say to them, well, I'm old. And I'm thinking, how old are you? 22. And I'm going, you're not old. Please, you don't have to date someone who was married before. You don't have to date someone who was in prison, God forbid. You're still, let's not lower our standards here. Know your worth. Know your worth.
And that would be your message to someone who
And that would be my message.
Yeah.
Know your worth. Do not settle.
Wow. Powerful. We'll be right back to our episode, but first, you have to check out Pizza Biza, making fresh hot pizzas on the spot by their professional chefs, indoor or outdoor in their pizza ovens, meat or dairy, plus full catering around the tri-state area and Florida. Specializing in events with several hundred people with no lines. You heard right. Full menu. You have to check them out on Instagram at Pizza Biza and visit them at pizzabiza.com. Best part, mention Meaningful Minute and get $500 off your next event. Pizza's my favorite food, so please invite me, Pizza Biza, on Instagram, and check them out at pizzabiza.com. Say Meaningful Minute and get $500 off your next event. These are the people you want to call. Pizza Biza, I'll see you at my next event. If you've ever wanted something more than anything in the world, then you've probably tried a segula or two. And if you're anything like me, then you've been dejected and disappointed when it seems like it didn't work. And that's why I love this organization called Better Than a Segula. Like their name, we learn on Simchas Torah, Ein Segula Ketorah. There is no better segula than Torah study. What this organization does is they have a group of Torah scholars that will learn something on your behalf in the zechus of what you want. And even better, the entire process is personalized. They can study a certain daf in the Gemara for 40 days, whatever you want, whatever speaks to your heart, whatever you connect to, you can let them know. So if this is something that you would find supportive, inspiring, and encouraging, you can contact them by either clicking the show notes below or take out your phone and call them at 732-364-7029. That's betterthanasegula.org, Better Than a Segula, an organization that's there to support you in the way that they know how to and in the way that they can.
So should we get to the proposal?
Sure. Yeah.
So
Sorry, you had said that you had prayed to God that you wanted to find your wife before you became public in the
Right.
music industry.
So what happened after we're already dating? I already knew my wife was my wife. We were very sure. But we did like a lot of young couples. We were already maybe 19, 20, whatever. And we're, when we have this amount of money and when we have all this, everything set up, we're gonna do our thing. So, but right around that time, I should actually mention what happened is that my mother passed away. My mother overdosed. One night she was dozing off more than she was addicted to narcotics. She was dozing off more than normal. And I noticed that, it was more than any other time that I had seen her. She was more like, hey, fall asleep sitting down, whatever, but she was standing up, like falling asleep, falling over. So after some time, I put her in the bed and I remember kissing her. I was crying. She was crying. I was crying because I just, how many times I went up the stairs to go check. I had a studio in the basement, so I would go up and check on her periodically. So I remember kissing her, putting her in the bed, and then I went and got my younger sister, who was sleeping in her room right around the way, and I woke her up and I said, "Go sleep in the bed with mom." And so before I went back downstairs, I called her because we would always talk, and I remember telling her, I said, "I feel like one day she's not gonna wake up." So I went back down to the studio afterwards. I was recording with a friend, and I think around 7 in the morning, my dad, my stepdad, I call him dad. He raised me. I have a great relationship with him and my biological father also. So I say dad for my stepdad and father for my biological father. But so my dad came down and he's like crying hysterically and he's looking at me like his body's shaking. She's gone. She's gone. She's gone. Him and my sister. I remember running up the stairs and I'm like shaking her and I'm like, what? You can't plan for such a thing. I was 19 years old. My mother was 37 at the time. So I remember just after shaking her, sitting there on the, and seeing she's lifeless, not moving. And I don't remember who was in there, but people started grabbing me and just, trying to take me away. And I remember like looking through the crack of them, like zipping the bag and taking her. Like the pain that I felt at that time was unlike any pain I ever felt before in my life. It was like such a void that just like went out of my world. My mother and I up until that point were best friends really because when I was young I was getting in trouble all the time. She had that, we raised kids differently. My mother used to walk around with a belt. She didn't even and they had to do that just from the morning until the night. She'll walk around with it, and not to say I deserved it, but she was tough on me when I was younger. And I appreciate that because with everything that was going on in the house and different things like that, my parents always wanted me to be better than them. There was never a time where they wanted me to just settle and to be the same as them. They always wanted me to do better. Even if they seen that I wasn't, they just, they wanted me to be better than them. So she was very strong on me about that. But that void left something very, very deep inside of me. And I remember feeling so much more submissive actually to God because I felt like, on the contrary, like, most people usually do away with God. For me, I felt like I didn't have any control. I felt like only God could be controlling it because if I was controlling him, my mother would still be here. So after that, I remember even calling my wife. She was in college at the time. And her and my mother had already by this time gotten very close. And so it was painful for her, painful for me. And she basically like just moved in with my family and really, tried as much as she can to help us out and and to be there. And for me, really honestly, it was the world for me um, because my mother played such a big role in my life. So to have my wife come into my life, like full time, she like literally dropped out of college, dropped out everything to be there with us, like
Yes.
so that not that I didn't know before, but for me, for sure, that made me feel as if like, okay, Shem's looking out for me. Look, he sent this woman into my life, Baruch Hashem, that to be there for me and to be there by my side and deal with all my emotional issues I was going through. And I think more so, I stayed at you guys' place more than that. My mother-in-law also too was a big help for me. So I would go and stay out there, out at their house. And mother-in-law for sure is old school. Window hanging out, shacking up. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm sleeping on the couch every day. And it was just a comfort for me that my wife provided for me. And then after that, we just decided, okay, we need to be serious. So I remember telling everybody at this point, I said, listen, I'm going to propose. This may be a year later, I think, maybe almost a year. And I was already doing concerts at this time. So, and I know my wife is she's not a public person. You should hear how hard it was for me to get her to come here. So she's a very not public, but she's very, very sanua and
The
doesn't
most
like to always
special
admit it.
things are those that are hidden.
That is
And
it.
so the moment I knew about Adina, I said, this is someone that I said, I davened. I said, Hashem, please let us share her. Because I knew she was special.
Thank
I didn't
you.
want her to do anything she didn't want to do, but I
Thank
was
you.
hoping we could share the goodness.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, Hashem.
Thank you.
No, she really is. And so afterwards, I got my whole family to like come to the show, cousins, distant cousins, whatever the case is, and went bought the ring, and I was going to propose to her. And I only found out years later that my younger sister spoiled everything. So she kind of already had a heads up. I don't know if she knew how. And I called her onto the stage.
Oh.
And I get down on one knee in front of everybody else. And I proposed to her. And still in my head that, in a few years from now, we'll actually get married. Everything's going. I have deals on the table. We're about to, everything completely fell through. Nothing happened the way it was supposed to happen. But during this time, I got interested in Judaism, and we started growing. And first, we first started. It was Messianic Judaism first. We didn't start with actual Yiddishkeit first. So we.
Is it okay if I pause you for a minute?
Yeah, please.
When he
please.
got on stage and asked you to marry him, what was your reaction? What was your feeling?
So I was very, very embarrassed. Like, honestly, like, I was like, did he really just call me up on stage to do this in front of all the people? Like, but Baruch Hashem, I was very happy. I was very happy. I knew that I wanted to marry my husband. And Baruch Hashem, I of course, I said yes, and here we are. But initially, I was very like, okay, do we really have to go through the whole calling me up on stage? Thank you for the flowers, though, but do we really have to do this? Like,
And it sounds like, firstly, Nissim, there's no one should lose a parent.
Right.
And no one should lose a parent through such a horrific way.
Right.
And my heart goes out to you and your family at that time and still, because it's something that happened and it's forever. And there's so much pain in Klal Yisrael. Everyone has experienced different levels, different experiences. And as you were talking and as I was hearing how incredibly supportive and loving you were.
Thank you.
Wow. I was thinking, I would love to ask Nissim how he got through something like that for those that are in pain that may find strength in your experience, if that's okay.
No, it's okay. It's totally fine. Really, like I said, my wife was the biggest thing that got me through. And I don't know if I handled it the right way, to be honest, in the first place. I did, but I didn't. Right? By us, we're not Jewish. There's no such thing as Shiva and whatever. People do come and make barbecues and come to the house and like, you have a joyful time and try to like more so celebrate it. But since my mother died in my bed and I still had the stains of the blood on my mattress, like I couldn't sleep in my room. I just couldn't sleep in my room. The pain was too. Every time I would go in there, so that's why I spent a lot of time out of my wife's place, and so what I kind of did, I kind of smothered myself in work, but I didn't forget about my mother. I actually wrote a song for my mother called Secret Place. And a good friend of mine, Cody, had made a track for me. And whatever, I had a preacher like talking through it and whatever. But it was such an emotional sounding song that it pulled out. Like I couldn't even barely get through writing the song. And it was only a few days after my mother passed away. And we were still going through picking out caskets and whatever and all these different things like that. So that was very, very it was very, very hard, but I drowned myself in music and work and kept myself busy and spending as much time with her as I could. That was more so what I did. I can't say that there was like one thing, I guess I shouldn't say, but there was a song that I would listen to, me and my wife, all the time, by Jamie Foxx, about losing his mother, which I think he was raised actually probably by his grandmother. And it was called I Wish You Were Here. And it was almost verbatim the exact words that I would have said to my mother at that time. And we had a long ride. So even anytime I need to go pick up something, go get clothes or whatever, we would drive all the way from where my wife lived in Federal Way, all the way back to Seattle, maybe 30, 45-minute ride or whatever. Her car was pretty old school at the time, so more on the 45 minutes. And, so we would be on our way back and forth. And I listened to that song like on the way there, on the way back, several times. Maybe 3-4 minutes or so.
But I wanted to make sure that my husband sat with those feelings, because a lot of times, like, when people experience a loss, they suppress themselves. Like he said, he tried to suppress himself in work and everything else. But for me, time stopped. For me, I had a very good relationship with my mother-in-law. I adored her. And she was amazing. I learned from her. But I wanted to make sure that he actually had those moments to where he can sit and go, oh, my mother's not here. I didn't want her to be just someone who was just put on the shelf or just to be forgotten about. It's like, no, you are experiencing a pain. You need to sit with it a little bit, enjoy it, mourn a little bit, and, remember her, think about her, cry, because it's healthy, right? If you're happy, you laugh. If you're sad, you can cry. It's an emotional thing. Mm-hmm. So I purposely made sure that those songs were playing so that he could relate to that, so he can get to that place of just like, wow, I really miss my...
You're so insightful. If you're getting married or know someone getting married, let's talk about one of the most meaningful parts of a Jewish wedding, the Ketubah. For some people, you may have seen it just as a regular piece of paper, but this is actually a symbol that represents the harmony, the beauty of your relationship. Ketubah.com takes your Ketubah and turns it into the beautiful piece of art that it really is. With over 500 different designs and artists from all over the world, you can personalize the perfect Ketubah of your dreams with a team that works intimately with you, making sure that your design and your words are exactly what you want. Ketubah.com guarantees a Ketubah that's probably better than you even dreamed. The best part is, if you go to Ketubah.com and type in SOH25, you'll receive free shipping on your Ketubah that may be flying in from Australia, London, even South Africa. Get this beautiful design as a gift or for yourself from Ketubah.com. Make sure to type in SOH25 to receive free shipping and find the link in the bio below. Get your beautiful piece from Ketubah.com today. I did a research project in grad school called How Spirituality Affects Bereavement Across Cultures. It was my final paper for school. I also experienced loss. So whenever this comes up in an interview, I always feel like, tell me more. And I explored Judaism, Buddhism, atheism, and Christianity, all academic texts, no Judaic sources. It was for a very secular school. And the research was fascinating. It said that according to science, Jewish culture provides the healthiest way of recovering and coping through grief.
Wow.
Because psychologically, the brain needs to be in that pain and needs to acknowledge where you are. And anyone that's familiar with Jewish bereavement knows that for the first week, you have to be in that space. You cannot distract yourself from things that feel good. So I just appreciate how you, in your Christian background, just Adina goodness, knew like, no, I knew this is what he had to do.
Well, I just felt it. Yeah. I felt like, it's not healthy not to sit with your emotions.
And if someone's in a place of pain and that's their instinct, it may feel scary to face it, but finding the right support is the healthiest thing you can do.
Right.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing, and thank you for letting us go there.
No problem.
So after you proposed, you were saying that you started to find Messianic Judaism.
Right. This was pretty, it was pretty insane. Like, I should probably say, I ended up, I was already, I had already released an album or something like that already, and I was helping another artist release their record, and we got into altercation with another rapper, and it turned very, very bad. Spoke about it a lot, but it put me in a kill or be killed situation. And once,
like literally.
And you should know, he was like, you didn't tell me. Like, he didn't tell me. Like, I just saw him.
Didn't know
like,
I was tripping at home.
Mamash, like, I really didn't. Like, I was, why is he so
idea.
stressed out? What is it? What's wrong? Like, what's the problem? And,
yeah. So it happened late at night. I got into it with another guy. He made a song about me, and instead of dealing with everything on songs, we took it to the streets. And so a good, I would say, a really, really good friend of mine, at the time, went up after we, got into this fist fight, this altercation. He decided he would take, his gun and go up after us and try to take out the other guy. So he shot everything except for a human. Ended up in a high-speed chase. Police ended up catching him. And right around the time that the police finally caught him I was coming out from our we had like a I wouldn't say studio, but we had like an office in the city where we would we had a whole duplication center over there. We would duplicate CDs, we would do all our flyers, everything. We handle all of our business independently over there from the music perspective. So when I came out and I saw, down the way, there was a lot of commotion. I went, and afterwards I found out what happened. And afterwards it put me in a situation where now I was told that the other guys were going to come for me because they think I just sent somebody to kill them. So now if I don't go do something, they're going to come after me. Like, what's the whole story? So that put me in a very, very tough situation. So like my wife said, I come back home. We had already finally, by this time, we just had our own apartment. And I'm walking back and forth, like
literally,
like not knowing what it is that I'm about to do. And I was praying, and I don't know how long it was. After some time, this guy calls me, and we talk everything out. And it's like, which was really a nice. I joke when I say this, but it's really true. It's a nice because nobody where I come from would ever call you to make sure whether or not you're trying to kill them. Like, that's not like a question. They just want to know, I want to be ready or anything like that. So the fact that we had a conversation let me know that it was probably, think about it now, that it was probably, people in the streets that let them know that I'm not really such a violent guy. I wasn't, what I mean? That's not really who I am. We had our altercation, but I was known for really being a peacemaker amongst different people and gangs and stuff like that. So we got on the phone, we talked it out, and after that, I stayed home and I started praying every day. I was walking back and forth, talking to God. Eventually, that led to me getting more and more interested in Bible again. I was a Bible thumper as a teenager. Like I really, literally took my Bible with me everywhere. I was taking it with me to chemistry class, even though it didn't have nothing to do with it. But I would take it with me literally everywhere. My grades would have been better if I would have just put my Bible down. So reuniting with it at that time in my life when something so, scary, so to speak, had happened, made me really, and after losing my mother, like everything that had led up until that point was like snowballed to like, I remember that I didn't want to live like this. I remember that this is not anywhere near who I thought I was going to be when I was that young junior missionary, getting everybody to go to, Bible study groups and stuff. So I lived with it. I sat with it every day, and I started going online. And when I went online, that's when I really started being opened up to like Messianic Judaism and Chabad.org. That like anything you search Jewish, one of the two comes up, right? That was the first thing. So I was going on both, and I was spending a lot of time at home going through this. And I started ordering more books, and some of them had Chumash, had Quran. I had so much stuff over there. And my wife probably had no idea what was going on. Like I became obsessed. I was spending 8 hours a day doing this, going between all the different texts, looking at everything. I was on
Mind you,
Google.
neither one of us had a job,
Right.
right? Like so it was just like I, knew mommy. My mother-in-law passed away. My husband's lost his job, and so it was just like, okay, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, hello.
Right.
Bills.
What was going through your head when you saw all these Judaic books coming and he's studying for 8 hours a day and you're like, Nissim?
What's going on? That's exactly it. Like I was thinking, what is he doing? What's going on? I had no idea that, honestly, I thought he was getting back into Islam. And so that was very scary for me. Because then that really made me go, not doing that. We're going to have to figure something out, So it created a silent distance, honestly. For people who are married, there is something that's called that silent distance, where it's just like, okay, you're making me feel uncomfortable. And so you naturally kind of like pull away a little bit. And so that's what I did. I pulled myself away a little bit and I just waited. I waited for him to come and approach me and tell me exactly what it was that he was doing. What was he studying? Why was he spending all those hours literally at our dining room table just reading books and just immersed in what he was doing? And I just waited.
Was
patiently.
that a silent distance with respect or silent distance with resentment?
Honestly, it was a bit of both because I respect my husband, but it was just like, starting to get a little irritated here,
Yes.
What's going on?
So you went through like the ultimate silent distance test of patience. Sounds like trusting that you believe he's trying to make the best decision for himself. Right. What would you tell someone, a couple who's in this position in a different way, where the other is doubting the other person's intention? And maybe instead of a silent distance, it's argumentative, there's tension, there's confusion, people evolve and change. What would you tell them?
Wow, that's a very good question. I would have to speak to the women, not the men on this one. And I would say, number one, you have to have that kesher with Hashem. And you have to have that belief that Hashem has you in the situation. And it's also a test for the mommy, for the women. It's a test for the wife to say, I trust my husband and I trust you, Hashem, and not to build up that resentment. Because that could easily cause a major, major distance, which truthfully no one wants. And so in order to overcome that, a woman would have to, number one, realize that it's a test and that is from Hashem, and you have to dig very deep. And you have to not take it personal. Not take it personal.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
If there's someone who knows, it's you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, what happens next?
So what happens next is we have a child yet. We were expecting, and wow, the day I sat down and told my wife, all the stuff I've been learning and whatever, and like she said, it led to this distance. She was not really excited, but the truth is that she had already been on her own journey. She was raised more, I think Baptist, Southern Baptist, and Pentecostal. And by the time I met her, she was Seventh-day Adventist, so she already had moved from Sunday to Saturday. So we had hope. So, so I think at some point she was studying or also going over all, and I was like crazy with notes. I was leaving notes all over the place on the computer. I was typing a bunch of notes, like anything I learned, like it was documented. I could have wrote a book. And the truth is that I don't know at some point where she was in her own personal thing, because she wasn't too macabre for me at the time, because I wasn't her best friend at that moment. And she came to me and just like, I feel like I've been lied to my whole entire life. And what are we going to do? And we felt like we were on this island. Like we didn't know what was going on. One thing that we knew for sure is that, listen, we already had our own place. We're going to have our first child. We need to get married. We're going to get married. We're going to get married.
It wasn't actually, let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
Remember, you came to me, my husband came to me, and he said, I want to speak to you about something important. Black, you don't remember saying that?
Yeah.
Yes. And it was in our living
Christmas, Easter.
Yes. And like, again, I felt like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me he's like getting into Islam. Like, I can't do that. Like, I really can't. And so I sat on one couch and he sat on the other. And he told me, he told me that he did not want to celebrate pagan holidays anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean? What's paganism? Right? At that point. So question after question after question. And so like he explained to me and, we spoke and Baruch Hashem, it wasn't like I just said, okay, yay, we're going to do this. It was like, no, I need time to study this on my own. And I also thought about my family. Christmas, right? Thanksgiving, Easter. These are family times where you get together and you cook and you have a good time. So it was like, I thought to myself, like, there's no way. How am I I can't merge this. Like, this is not going to happen. And so I took my time. It was slowly by me. And it took me back actually when I was 12. And my stepfather was a minister. And I remember opening up the Bible as a 12-year-old in the Old Testament and the New Testament thinking, this doesn't make any sense. And so I would ask him questions. And his answer to me would be, you just have to believe. You just have to believe. It doesn't make sense, but you just have to believe. And that was that. And so fast forward back to this moment where my husband's telling me now about paganism and the origins of Christianity and Easter and the Easter bunny and the fertility eggs and all this. And I'm going, wow, this is what I needed when I was 12. And so that's what made me go, I have to dig into this a little bit. I want to know.
Wow.
Yeah. So we after that we decided for sure we wanted to be married. That's it. One thing for sure, we didn't want to bring children into the world where we weren't married at that time, although we didn't know, according to Jewish law, we were good. But we had a very small wedding. We always said we'll have a bigger wedding. And trust me, at this time, we had no idea that we were going to convert Judaism or anything like that. It's like what most people say when they like hurry up and go to Vegas and get married. They're like, yeah, we're going to have another wedding later,
Yeah.
So we didn't go to Vegas. we took out one of the rooms in the cabanas of the place we were staying in. And what happened was my father at this time was already a theologian and professor and whatever. And we, at this point, were we decided, listen, we're gonna get married in a very traditional, regular way. My father came, he married us. We had 2 witnesses over there on the side, according to what you needed there in the state of Washington, whatever. And we just got married. And we said, listen, we'll make it another wedding another time, but we just want to make sure that we were
Moving
doing
in the
right
right direction.
and going in the right direction and doing what we thought was right in God's eyes at the time. And so fast forwarding a little bit, I'm still like overly obsessed with everything I was learning at the time, which kind of spun into us really getting involved in the Messianic congregation. And I would say like it was very, very tough at that time. I think it was a lot of resentment, more so from my wife, because she grew up Christian. So it was sort of like, Hashem, like, why'd you do this to us? Like, why'd you allow us to not know
Very
the
much so.
MS and whatever? And we really felt that way. And Go ahead.
Almost felt like boy, it was such a hard time. It was like that moment, like I just feel like God, you don't love me? Like
Mhm.
like how come I wasn't born knowing this? Like how come I didn't know this? How come I had to find out this way? Like almost like, I hate to say this, but like a stepchild. Like
Mhm.
like Hashem just didn't care about me. Like I just, definitely left out. I took it personal.
Yeah, she did take it personal.
Yeah.
But that led to us at the time, though, like really strengthen. I mean, our house, you never seen a house of prayer like that. We were praying every day and growing and learning. And my brother-in-law's my other best friend, this is where this all comes in. I should mention, also at my same house, my other best friend, Yosef, was also coming over at a few years back. I'm gonna fast forward to get to where we are now. And I'm gonna rewind to get to where we are now. And so my wife had a younger sister. So I met my wife because the older sister was dating my other best friend, Robert. So then me and my wife started dating, and now my younger sister-in-law, she's younger than her. I think she's older than me, but she's younger than her. Was coming over all the time, but my other best friend Joseph was coming by all the time also too. So they ended up also meeting at my house. So I always tell people, for Jewish couples, I'm gonna turn to the camera and tell you now. Listen, a lot of people go to a mukah. I tell people all the time that if you want to daven on the shidduch, you go to Seattle, Washington, 51st Street in Willow, and go daven outside my house, because I've met my wife there. My brother-in-law Yosef met his wife there, and Baruch Hashem,
Hey, Nissim, like $50 entry fee. We're
Yeah,
Jewish.
50,
Let's monetize on this,
Yes. So they also met there, and so now fast forwarding, now me and my wife are on a journey. They're already, together at this point, and they start growing with us and learning. My wife obviously got her sister very excited about it because they grew up together, so they could share those same exact experiences. Yosef was less religious than all of us. He didn't grow up with almost any of it. So, me and my wife, like at 15, 16, when I was a devout Christian, I would lock myself in my room and pray to God like most of the day. My wife was doing the same thing as a kid. She would go into hours, lock herself in her closet. So we were already very spiritually in tune. But Yosef was like, I remember the day when I told him I don't eat beef or pork or anything like that. And he like came and cleaned out my whole entire cabinet and went to go home. Was like, oh, you don't eat this? So, he was like just totally oblivious to everything that was going on. And then at some point, because obviously his wife to be, his girlfriend at the time, was getting into it. So then, before you know it, was all of us on this journey together, and we're
Judaism,
to
or
Judaism,
just to spirituality.
Just spirituality at that point. We were on the path to Yiddishkeit, but we didn't know yet. Well, our first stop was Messianic Judaism, Jews for JC type thing, and so that was the beginning for all of us. I mean, I was working for the apartment complex, I think, at the time. So I had the keys to the building, and I'd already cleared with management that I could take out the cabana. So what we would do is, like, every Friday night or whatever, I would run a Bible study group for whoever in the neighborhood wanted to come. And as I was learning new things about Judaism and about whatever, I was teaching to everybody, me and my wife. We had food. And then the moment it happened, I remember I went on Chabad.org. And this was probably one of the most instrumental things. I went on Chabad, and throughout one of the videos of Minden Kaplan and, Rabbi Gordon, Oliver Shalom, a few of the people that I would watch on there pretty faithfully, I came across a documentary called Shabbat, I think Island of Time. I think it was produced or at least sponsored by the Rohr family of Miami. That 20-minute documentary changed my life forever. I'm telling you, I remember watching it and I started crying. And it wasn't because the production quality was great or anything like that. It was but I remember watching and it just going inside of people's lives and what Shabbos was actually supposed to look like. Because everything we learned was from Tanakh, right? We were going out. I think we were fasting 3 days at a time, crying out to Hashem. We were having so much of an experience with Hashem during this time between us four, that anything that we felt or saw or read that Hashem wanted from us, we were like willing to do, right? And so I remember seeing this Shabbat documentary. I had such yearning and kisufim for Shabbos. And I remember everybody didn't know what I was doing. Like next day I came with a tablecloth. I bought some Banashevis. I bought some non-kosher challahs from the bakery. I didn't know they couldn't be baked by non-Jews. But whatever the case, I went. God, I'm brought up to the table. Like we had a whole thing. We had fish. We had, so more and more Shabbos started to feel like Shabbos. So I just started turning off my Kirk Franklin in the background. I had playing and whatever, the Smoky Norfolk. These are gospel singers. You don't know that. So that was what we used to play music first, and then everybody would come in and we would sing. But we had this growth going on that was consistent, but we're on fire for Hashem. And we shared it together.
So many people struggle to connect spiritually simply because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash anymore. We live in Galut.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to see God. You mentioned how you and your wife would just talk to God, cry to God. I'm curious to hear what was behind that prayer. Like, was it from pain asking to heal, or was it simply, I want to connect to you, or a different category?
So for me, I can say, growing up, my mother, Baruch Hashem, she had 6 children. I'm 5 of 6.
Sounds like she was Jewish.
She was married to my sibling's father, but my father, she was not. I don't ever remember seeing my parents in the same house. And growing up, it's kind of like, I guess that's normal, But as I got older, I started venturing out a little bit, like older, like maybe high school, and seeing actually at the Seventh-day Adventist church that I went to that, things are not like that. Like you can have, your mother and your father happily married in a household. And at that point, I guess that's when it started to hit. Something clicked. It was like, wow, I really missed out on something. I didn't have my father. Or, it's like, what happened to him? How come things didn't really work out between my mother and him? And, so on and so forth. And at that point, instead of getting into the guys, right, or any other thing that can kind of fill that void, I naturally turned to Hashem. I naturally turned to God. And so that's where I left all my hurt and my pain or my discomforts or my questions. Even if I didn't have answers to them, that's where I left them. And so prayer to me was my lifeline.
It was very healing.
And still is my lifeline. Because I didn't want to go out. My mother would tell me, this is funny, hope I don't get in trouble for this, but she would say things like, don't ever drink, don't ever, your father was, an alcoholic, and you just don't ever want to do that. And Baruch Hashem, I never did. Like I never got into drugs, never got into alcohol, never got into, all the other bad things that kids would do. I just was afraid to, and I didn't want to have that reputation. I didn't want to be that girl who just felt like everyone else fell. Like, another one bites the dust, sort of say. I didn't want to do that. And so my comfort became Hashem.
Hashem became your drug of choice.
That's right.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
That's where I went for my
I would say
Yeah.
also to me, and because what happened is there's a funny story. I was 16 years old, and during this time was like one of those times I was always spending time talking with God inside of my room. And the main connection for me was the fact that I genuinely, at that time in my life, wanted to be close to Him. I really purely wanted that. And I wanted that strongly from the time I was 13 years old. I remember specifically crying to God at the edge of the bed, wanting to know the truth. I just had a breakdown. My heart was like yearning for some reason. And I felt this throughout my childhood, but like when I was 13, wow, it hit me very hard.
Mm.
So here I am, 15, 16. I'm involved in all the Bible study groups and everything I learn. I'm reading my Bible every day and I'm involved in it. So what happened is that we would usually, I would be the last kid to be dropped off. I was like the teacher's pet kind of type thing. I was very close to my counselor, like my head counselor, whatever. So he would take me last. So I was staying at a cousin's house overnight, and we had a track meet the next day. We were on the track team, and I really only did it to stay in shape for the football season. So we ended up getting pulled over by a bunch of minivans, and they hop out. It's the U.S. Marshals. So they have us surrounded. They have guns on us, and we're like sitting in the middle of the thing. We're like, what? They're looking for one of my uncles. The car was in his name. And so they take us out and we give them our ID and they check my ID and they see that from the time I was, 13, when I was running with the wrong crowd, I had a warrant for my arrest. In between that time, my house had burnt down completely. And we were misplaced for about 2 years or whatever in between that time. So by the time we're just now back in our new place. So all the mail, everything that was coming forward, I didn't know I had a failure to appear in court. I was supposed to go to court and just to testify because out of all the things I could have gotten in trouble for, this I actually didn't do anything, and they let me go, within hours of me being detained when I was 13. So, but because I didn't appear in court, I had a warrant. So they end up calling the local police. So the Seattle Police Department comes and they pick me up, and it would just happened to be on the route to my dad's way to his office or whatever work he was working at this time. And so he sees it, gets out the car, and he's like screaming at the police. And they're like, "Sir, we're going to take you too if you don't calm down." And they're arresting me. And by this time, when I was younger and I was running with the wrong crowd, there's several reasons I probably could have got in trouble, right? But at this time, I was like Mother Teresa or something. They arresting, I heard she's not so Grodko also, but I'm just saying, I was like a good kid. There was no point at all for me to be getting arrested. I was captain of the football team. I was doing okay. And so they ended up taking me into custody. I ended up going to juvenile detention center. And nobody looks innocent in the orange suit. But I remember walking into my room. It was a tiny room, and I literally felt like I was walking to an insane, like some asylum. These kids were not normal. So I ended up going into my room, and I'm there, and there's a toilet, there's a Bible, and there's a bed, like a very, very tiny room. And in that place, I had so much peace. I was talking to God, like, in my room, but like on steroids. And I felt that God was close to me, and I felt I had such a wonderful time there, and I was experiencing next level. Like, this is what I've been looking for. So I get a buzz like a day or two later, and they say, "You have a visitor." They tell me on the intercom. So whatever they told me what hour, got myself ready, went up, and I go into this room, and I'm standing there, and then around the corner comes my mentor. And he looks at me and he just burst out laughing. He is like cracking, and he's laughing so hard that I start laughing with him. I have no idea what we're laughing about, but it was contagious. So I'm laughing, he's laughing, whatever. So after we're done, I said, why are you laughing? And he says to me, he says, "You know what?" He says, "Every day I take you home after all the different Bible study groups. He takes me home last. So I go all the way out as far as where she lived, almost near to an hour away to come back, even though I lived down the street from the place. But he would, me and him would be busy talking about God or whatever." So he says, "Do you realize the last couple of weeks, all you've been saying to me is you want time with you and God alone. You want to go somewhere, you want to be someplace with no distractions or whatever." My house was busy still. So I always wanted to be with God just alone. And he said, "Be careful what you pray for." So just to give you an idea of this yearning. And I remember when, during this journey, when we got into it, really, I was running around asking people. By the time we were on that cusp, right before we started coming to Yiddishkeit, I was having this also very passionate wanting to be alone with God feeling. And I would ask people, it's like, I need a cabin I could go to just for like 30 days to be alone, to be with just me and Hashem. And I wanted to go. I mean, I was lighting candles and burning incense and talking with Hashem all night long. Like, that's really where we were, because I just wanted to be close to him. I felt such a sense of a pull and desire towards Hashem that like you said, tomorrow, it became my drug of choice of really trying to connect myself with
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What would you tell someone that's not feeling that pull and they're listening to you and they're thinking, oh God, why didn't you make me a convert or a Baal Tshuva? I want to feel that excitement.
I think you may have a bigger issue finding it by a FFB, to be honest, because what happens is that usually, in my experience, the converts and Baal Tshuva more likely have these moments because we feel that distance. And one of the reasons is explained in the Sephorim. If I could just give somewhat of a touch on what Reb Nachman says about those who are further away give the kavod to Hashem, and Hashem reaching that. When one person makes tshuva in a dark place, it's a light that shines in that place, that Hashem has more kavod in that place. But one of the things that's very, very important is that in order for Hashem to reach people that are so far, it's just no difference. If we turn on one of these lights, to reach a further distance, you have to turn up the light. The light has to get brighter and brighter and brighter. And so once the person realizes he's being shined to, the wattage, the dosage of that light is so strong and so powerful that it pulls a person towards it, and it's easier to feel that fire, as opposed to where a person who was religious the whole entire life, they're in the light the whole time, they don't even know the difference. You can't really tell the difference.
Can I say something? I really like your question. And if I could answer that, I would say, like, I recently read a book. I love reading books about tzaddikim. And the latest book that I read is about the Ribnitzer Rebbe. And I remember in this book, there was a story about the Ribnitzer and how, like, I think he was walking outside and something caused him to fall. I don't know what it was, but he fell on the floor. And before he got up, like, people were trying to help him up very quickly. Like, wow, this is the Rav, you got to hurry up. And he's like, no, wait, just let me sit. And afterwards, someone asked, like, why did the Rav want to sit? Why did you want to sit? Why didn't you want to get up right away? And he said, because there was a reason why I fell. Like, I wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to make teshuvah. There was something that I did that caused me to fall spiritually. And with that, oh my goodness, I took a lot from that. Number one is, when a person experiences that distance, it's not always because they did an Avera, as my husband would tell me. It could be, maybe Hashem really wants us to just go full speed, like really, really chazak on chasing Hashem, on going even harder. Because I find a lot, like, sometimes we can become so complacent and just settle down a little bit in our avoda to Hashem. But from that, I took that, listen, if you fall, look around a little bit. What caused you to fall? If it was something, make tshuva, get back up and go again. Like, you have to, there's that persistence, that's that will, that desire, that, that sensitivity. And so for me, I always try to say, if I'm feeling that distance from Hashem, I'll question, oh, Abba, did I do something wrong? And if I didn't do anything wrong, okay, let me just read a little bit more to Tehillim. Let me listen to more shiurim, whatever it is to bring me closer to Hashem. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, and something that I'm learning from both of you is that you invested so much in order to have the relationship. I think it's only natural for us to think, God, I'm not feeling inspired. Hit me up. It's your fault. I'm not feeling inspired.
Right.
Oh, how come you are more distant from God? I just wasn't feeling him anymore. I wonder how often we forget that we need to invest.
Absolutely.
And that feeling, that's like the blessing. That's like the gift from God where he's making it easier and more pleasant. Right. And that's something that the two of you highlight, like you've invested everything you have in each other, in your journey, in your career, and in your motherhood. And it sparkles like the disco ball that the two of you are. And that's so, so inspiring. This is such a tease because I really feel like we need a TV show of the Blacks. And then we need like a special feature edition of like Adina. And I have to be mindful of the time. And it's so, this is such a tease for me. But I kind of want to ask, because this is Stories of Hope and your story is so hopeful, what's a message that you would give for someone on their journey in love and they haven't found the right person yet? What would be your takeaway?
Wow. Well, number one is Hashem's timing is perfect. And whenever you feel that discouragement or the voices, right, that'll come into the head of, oh, it's never going to happen. Oh, maybe I missed out. Oh, don't. Listen. Continue. Daven. Know that Hashem's timing is perfect. Know that you will find your other half. It will happen. Don't become discouraged, because I find when a person becomes discouraged, they give up, right? And the standards begin to become lowered. And, it's like, we don't want to do that. Stay happy. Be besimcha. And know that Hashem has what's best. And savlanut. It will happen.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would piggyback and say that it's patience. And it's the beauty of that patience, like there's so many different steps. I try to tell young couples, and Baruch Hashem, me and my wife made our first shidduch this past year, and we're very close to our second, actually for the first time. And we got tons of resumes, so Shim's gonna make us busy this year. So, but one of the things I've been advising is that each step of the way is a matana from Hashem. The beginning part was just you and Hashem. That's such an opportunity, especially what I like to tell guys is like, it's one thing to find the right girl, but it's another thing to be the right guy for the right girl, right? Sometimes we are all the time, we're so eager to find our other half or whatever, but we're a shattered piece of half, and we got to make sure that we are, and I don't think that it always comes from a place of like, where all the time you need much more time, but you need the right amount of time. You need the right time invested in your relationship with Hashem to make sure that, anything in life where you're overly antsy about getting something, usually it's just really not the time for it. Because most things that come to a person in life that are good for the person come b'derech shalom, b'derech peace. I was by a big tzaddik one time, and he said that, sometimes the yetzer also is a time of chochem. So how do I know whether or not this is coming from Hashem? And how do I know whether or not it's coming from the Eitzah Hara? Because it could be great Eitzah coming from one or the other. And what the tzaddik says, it says that generally when you feel that it's very loud and it's pushy, and it's even if it's something good and it's very loud and it's pushing and it's pressing, usually that's the Eitzah Hara. So Hashem speaks in a thin, still voice when he's saying it. So the patience has to come with having the ability to be like, Hashem, I'm good. You and I, we're good. I want, but we're good. The next level is that when you're that newlywed or whatever, enjoy your wife. Have 7 kids. I wish I could take this lady out more than what I do. I wish we could have more time together. Whatever. And I see all these young couples and they're just so ready. The next step is we need to hurry up and have children. Okay, Baruch Hashem, enjoy your spouse and be able to enjoy the time that you have together, because once you get a few, you never know if you have. So everything I see is this gradual patience and making sure you're in that right place before the next thing comes. And it's not always a matter of time, but it's in terms of length. It's about the quality of the time that you're spending while you're either by yourself or when you're a new couple. So that's my
and also I would say for the women, daven for your husband.
Daven. Wow.
Daven for him.
Daven
for don't leave anything off the table. Daven about everything. That's the key. That's the key. And
so powerful.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to send you my davening list because you're both experts. So we'll talk about that off camera. But this has been extraordinary, extremely special, so inspiring and hopeful. Adina,
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the brave step and coming on. I
Thank
don't
you.
know why you could have possibly been nervous. I'm so moved and I'm so
thank you.
grateful. Nissim, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
convincing Adina to come on and for being willing to come on yourself. This
Thank
has
you.
been
Thank you.
extremely special.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching another episode of Stories of Hope. If this message inspired you in any way, please let Nissim and Adina know in the comments section below. They were so brave in coming on our podcast, especially Adina, someone who's never been on a podcast before, and saying messages like yours of encouragement and appreciation make it all worth it. So thank you once again, Adina and Nissim, for joining our mission for change. If you have any feedback or have an idea of someone that would be a really good fit for our podcast, as always, I personally love reading your messages and appreciate your teamwork. So you can reach out, let us know at soh@meaningfulminute.org. That's soh@meaningfulminute.org. Thank you for all of your help. Thank you for enabling us to continue this important work. As I always say, we can't do it without you.